What's going on, my fellow residents? It's me, TheFrozenCavern, and today it is finally time for the third chapter of Cursed Cowardly Dog, All Things End, Volume 1. And that's still a long title, but whatever. Anyways, Chapter 3, Steeped in Nightmares. Now, before we start off, I want to say sorry for it taking so long since the last episode, but I want you guys to realize this is not the easiest thing to do. And not only that, I actually have some help. I have two people who are doing drawings now, and I'll leave them in the description below. And now I have some voice actors, one for Eustace and one for Muriel, so I'm not doing everything myself. I do have to rely on other people to have to be able to keep up with their own work. So hopefully you guys like the end product. But anyways, without further ado, let us begin. The rest of the night went by like it always did. In fact, it almost had that air of normalcy Courage so dearly missed. Muriel let him nap on her lap again, Eustace read his newspaper, and they both ignored the fact that they had been fighting. Courage was just happy to have things back to normal, at least for now. Eustace gave a loud yawn, signaling the end of their night. He set his newspaper down and turned the TV off. Muriel placed Courage onto the floor as she always did, and wordlessly joined Eustace at the foot of the stairs. Courage cringed as he gazed over at his owners. He couldn't bear the thought of going up those stairs again, especially after his attack. He was so weak right now that he could hardly even walk, much less get up the staircase. Muriel apparently sensed his hesitation and moved forward to pick him up, but he shrunk back as she drew nearer. He didn't want her to help him despite knowing that he'd never make it up there alone. It would be an admission of his weakness, and he didn't want to acknowledge it. He knew that he couldn't get up those stairs without help, but he wasn't willing to admit that he needed the help either. It was absolutely infuriating and left him feeling completely helpless.
Courage?
She asked, outstretching a hand towards him. He drew in a breath and allowed her to pick him up. He surrendered to his exhaustion and hung limply in her arms. He couldn't fight it any longer. He just wanted to go to sleep and hopefully wake up feeling better tomorrow.
Are you okay, Courage?
She asked as she walked them up the staircase. He nodded weakly in reply, not bothering to open his eyes back up again. They were too heavy to lift anyways. They entered the bedroom and she set him down on the bed. Eustace was already in the bathroom at this point, so she sat there beside the exhausted dog. He was already half asleep and barely even noticed that she was there. He felt her place a hand on his head, and he opened one eye to look up at her. He muttered out a few gibberish words and then closed it again.
Good night, Courage,
she said. The weariness in her voice was apparent. He drifted off to sleep several minutes later. He was vaguely aware of the sounds that Muriel and Eustace made as they got ready for bed, but nothing could pull him out of his exhausted sleep completely. 30 minutes later, he snapped wide awake, his mind suddenly alert. He glanced around the room, confused at his sudden wakefulness, but found nothing out of the ordinary. Muriel and Eustace were still asleep, and the night was as calm as ever. Not even the wind was making the wooden house creak. He glanced over at his owners and watched as they slept. A sense of fear and foreboding made his heart race and kept him from relaxing. His mind wouldn't stop wandering back to his impending doom. He was already exhausted, and yet his mind refused to shut down despite it. What if he really couldn't be saved? What would Muriel do without him? Would Eustace replace him? Would they get another dog? Could the old couple really go on without him? What would it be like to die? What would it be like to be put down? He shivered and whined softly to himself. He had a desperate urge to crawl in between the two pillars of the old couple, but he held himself back. It would be like he were a puppy all over again, hiding from the strange sounds that echoed through the house. No, he did not want to wake Muriel up, and crawling in between her and Eustace would certainly do that. He considered going to see Computer, but he knew that he didn't have the strength to walk across the hall and over to the attic either. If Computer wasn't ready for him, he'd be told to leave anyway. He didn't want to put that much effort into getting there when he knew that all of it was going to be for nothing anyway. Computer wouldn't care if he was tired or not, and he certainly wouldn't tolerate his presence longer than he had to. Sighing, he laid back down. He was never going to fall asleep if he kept worrying himself like this. He allowed his mind to focus on the rhythmic snoring of his owners, and slowly but surely, he calmed down. Suddenly, Muriel's voice woke him up.
Courage? Courage! It's time to get up.
She kept shaking him until he finally opened his eyes, groaning slightly and unsure of what was going on. This didn't seem right. She usually let him sleep as long as he needed to.
Time to go to the doctor, Courage,
she told him in a cheery voice. It was so uncharacteristic of her after how she reacted to his illness. He recoiled in shock. A pit formed within his stomach at this uncanny turn of events. She was smiling down at him with a surprising air of cruelty. But I thought we weren't going until Friday, he asked, even though he knew they wouldn't understand him.
Here you go, you dumb dog.
Eustace spoke, appearing from somewhere behind him and clamping his purple leash around his neck. But wait, Courage pleaded. The proper words he wanted to say wouldn't come out. It was like his voice had completely gone away. It felt like his heart was about to explode from terror. What was going on here?
Let's get this over with.
Muriel snapped. Her tone was becoming more and more nasty with every word she spoke. Eustace began to yank at the leash.
Come on, you stupid dog. You ain't needed around here no more. Time to take a nap. A long, long nap.
Courage dug his nails into the wooden floor and fought with every fiber of his being, but it was no use. He didn't want to die. Why were they doing this to him? Why did it have to end like this? Eustace gave a mighty tug on the leash, and despite Courage's best efforts, he was sent flying.
No!
He screamed, struggling the whole way. Somehow the old couple managed to lift his flailing self all the way down the staircase, through the living room and into the truck. He had tried to make an escape through the window, but Eustace caught him before he could get away.
Don't be so difficult, Courage. It'll all be over soon.
Muriel sternly scolded him. He was placed in his usual spot between Muriel and Eustace and whined desperately up at them as they both got ready to leave. They ignored his whines, much to his growing sorrow, and he could only watch in fear as the farm fell away from his view. This would be the last time he ever saw his home again. He tried to go over several escape plans in his head, but he knew that none of them would work. Eustace would catch him no matter what he did, and he was too sick to run very far. The old couple chatted merrily about how happy they were to finally be getting rid of that stupid dog. They both ignored the pitiful looks he was giving them. He knew that it was hopeless. Even if he managed to escape, where would he go? It felt as if it was only a matter of seconds before their journey ended. They pulled up to the vet's office and yanked him out of the truck. The brick building loomed over them, casting a shadow so large that it seemed to swallow the whole world. The letters atop the building glowed with a crimson malice. The giant brick coffin was all but beckoning to him, as if it had been waiting for him to return all this time. He pulled at the leash the whole way up to the building, and Eustace all but bashed him to death as he yanked him up the stairs. His head managed to smack into every last one of them as he struggled against the old farmer's iron grip. Muriel sneered at him.
Time to go, Courage. For good.
The sickly smell of medicine filled his nostrils as they entered the waiting room. They didn't even have to wait for their turn. The receptionist just glared at Courage and then pointed over at a door. Still struggling against his leash, Muriel and Eustace pulled him through the door and plopped him down onto a cold metal table. He sat there shivering with fear. He knew that it was over, and there was nothing he could do about it now. The metal door opened again, and this time, his heart nearly stopped when he saw the doctor who entered through it. It was that awful veterinarian who had blasted his parents off into space. No. 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 He whimpered, glancing around for something, anything to help get him out of this room alive. The veterinarian looked down at his clipboard and then broke out into an awful grin. Well, well, well. I wasn't expecting to do this to you this soon. Courage let out a scream of pure terror. He was certain that his heart would give out right then and there. He couldn't bear it. He had to get away. Far, far away from that awful man. He jumped off the table and bolted out the door before anyone could stop him or grab his leash. He heard a crashing sound behind him as either Muriel, Eustace, or the vet went after him. He didn't dare take the time to look back.
Courage!
He heard Muriel cry out. He made his way down the empty hall, very much aware of the footsteps trailing behind him. He crashed through the door on the other side and was horrified to find that it no longer led to the waiting room, but now led to a dirty kennel instead. Hundreds of dogs barked madly at him.
Meet your fate! Meet your fate!
They chanted in unison. He ran through the room, ignoring the cries of his fellow canines. He crashed through another door and this time landed in a vacant room. The barks of the dog still echoed all around him, but he ignored it. The vet would soon be on his tail and nothing else mattered except getting away. The room had no windows nor any doors, all except for the one that he had just used. And there was a single steel vault on the other side. Every instinct he had seemed to be screaming at him to not go near that metal door. But it looked like he didn't have much of a choice either way. There was no other way out aside from turning around and running right back into the veterinarian's clutches.
Oh, Courage! Where are you? It's time to go. Running isn't going to help.
Muriel yelled. Her voice was muffled, but still getting closer. Left with no other choice, he ran over to the vault and opened it. He was hit with a cold blast of air and then several garbage bags fell out, toppling all over him. A horrible smell nearly made him gag. Yuck! He cried out, placing a paw up against his nose. The smell was impossible to block out. He looked up and found a sign taped to the wall. A gasp left his throat without him even willing it. A moment of sheer terror ran through him as he realized what those bags were. He let out a horrible scream and turned to run. The world had unfortunately changed yet again, and this time he was looking down a seemingly endless hallway. A giant exit sign glowed like a beacon, guiding him out of his horror, but he didn't know if he could even make it that far. It seemed like it was miles away. Despite his doubts, he ran as fast as his legs could carry him. He was tiring out fast from his panic, but he didn't care. That exit sign just didn't seem to get any closer, but he wasn't giving up. This was his only means of escape. No matter how far or how long he ran, he wasn't getting any closer to the door. In fact, it felt like it was getting farther and farther away. He let out a cry of frustration and toppled over. He had to stop running. He was just getting too tired to continue, and he couldn't afford to aggravate his condition at a time like this. He sat there panting, hunched over with one paw on his knee. He looked up at the glowing exit sign and found that it was turning into a pinprick on the horizon. The walls around him seemed to be getting larger and larger too, while he was getting smaller and smaller. His freedom had been so close, and yet...
Gotcha!
The vet suddenly shouted, causing him to jump. He turned and tried to run, but it was too late. The vet pulled a net out from behind his back and caught him before he could do so much as lift a paw.
Ready to go, little fella?
The crow man asked, putting the net up to his face and laughing. The world melted away and changed yet again. This time they were back in that room with the metal table. Courage, screaming at the top of his lungs, was pulled out of the net and forced down onto the metal table. He was then quickly strapped down and left with no chance of escape. It was over, he realized. He was doomed. Part of him resigned himself to his fate, but the other half still fought like a trapped animal. He couldn't free himself no matter how much he tried. All he could do now was shiver in fear and hope that some kind of miracle would occur. A terrible wave of sadness rolled through him. He had no way out and no place to go. Muriel and Eustace almost seemed happy to see him go too. Wasn't Muriel at least sad? Right now she was smiling gleefully and rubbing her hands together in anticipation.
Time to go, Courage,
she said in a deathly quiet voice.
Stupid dog! Hurry up and die already!
Eustace yelled.
I've been waiting a long time for this,
the vet added, pulling out a syringe that was almost as big as he was. The needle itself was even bigger and gleamed dangerously in the light. Its content glowed a sickly green, and the bubbles were rising up to create the shape of a skull and crossbone. Courage could see his own reflection in the liquid, scared and so very tired looking. He barely even resembled his old self anymore. Maybe it was a good thing for him to die. He had never been right ever since he had gotten sick, and he certainly wasn't the Courage he had once been. Maybe this was why Eustace and Muriel didn't want him around anymore. In his liquid reflection, he could see them, and even his parents waving goodbye. In fact, he could see everyone he had ever known waving goodbye to him. Even his old enemies were there, waving happily because he was dying. They all just seemed so happy to see him go. Well, if they wanted him to die so badly, then maybe it really was his time to go.
Goodbye!
No, he whimpered, tears falling freely from his eyes. How could they all want him to die so badly? Then he realized that computer wasn't there. Of all the figures in that reflection, the machine was the only one missing. He was the only one still holding out for him. He was the only one trying to find a way to help him, instead of just giving up and waving goodbye. Courage smiled at the thought of it, and all the sorrow he felt melted away completely. It was replaced with a calm acceptance. He could face his end knowing that someone still cared, even if it was from his snide computer. And then, the reflections all vanished, leaving him to face his fate alone. The vet shifted the giant syringe so that the needle was now pointing down at him. That single moment of acceptance vanished, and was now replaced by cold, hard terror, a kind that one felt when they knew they were about to die.
This won't hurt one bit.
No, please. He squeezed his eyes shut and waited. The vet jabbed the needle into his heart, and he screamed out in agony. A burning sensation sliced through his chest. He thrashed around for several seconds, trying to escape the poison that was now entering his body. The pain was unimaginable. He flung himself in every direction, but it was no good. There was no escape. And then he woke up.
The horrible pain was not coming from a needle in his chest, but instead from another attack that had struck him while he slept. He rolled back and forth across the bed, wishing that it would end, wishing it would go away. He seemed to lose control of his flailing limbs and then toppled off the bed. Just as quickly as it had came, it was soon over and he was left gasping on the floor. He whimpered to himself as a sense of crushing hopelessness fell over him. He was going to die. Computer would not be able to help him, and he was going to die. He pulled together what little energy he had left and sat up. He gazed back up at the bed and hoped to find Muriel and Eustace staring down at him, but that was not the case. His attack mustn't have woken them up despite his cries. He doubted that he could climb back up into the bed alone, but he didn't want to wake them up either. Sighing to himself, he fought back the growing sense of complete powerlessness that he felt. That dream had shaken him badly. Did Muriel and Eustace really want him to die? They both assumed that just because he was in pain that he wanted to die because of it. It was almost angry with them for not considering what he wanted. Couldn't they at least be nice enough to wake up and help him out? Were they just pretending that he wasn't there? Practicing for when he really was gone? He forced that anger out of his mind. He wasn't going to worry about it. There was no point in getting angry with them either way. He didn't want to burden Muriel anymore, and he was tired of making her feel sad. If she wanted him to stop suffering, who was he to fight it? "I'm doomed," he moaned, tears stinging at the edges of his eyes. The image of that giant syringe was still burnt into his mind, and he knew it was coming. Unsure of what else to do, he crawled under the bed, just wanting to get away from everybody. He didn't want to deal with Muriel, Eustace, or even Computer anymore. He let his depression overtake him, and he lay there sobbing until he finally fell into a deep, dreamless sleep.